All right. Okay. Yeah. So, as you all probably read or at least looked at, the story is Knifeblade by Sehui. Cool author because he's still alive. Yeah, he hasn't died yet. So there he is, Sehui. He was born on August 20th, 1942. Cool date because that's when World War II started for us, I believe. No, ended. No. Something important happened in World War II on the year 1942.
I thought Sehui was a girl's name. That's really funny.
Oh
Is
no,
it a
he's
girl?
definitely a guy.
Okay.
There he is.
Not a girl.
Yeah, so there he is right there. This picture is really popular of him. It was funny because since he's still living, you would think that there'd be like a bunch of pictures out there of him. Because I mean, this novel is a pretty, I feel like, worldwide renowned novel. And well, The Dwarf is not this story, but so you'd think there'd be more pictures of him, but no. I guess in keeping with the tradition of Korean authors, they take one picture, they like it, they keep it.
They put it in black and white.
And I have one in sepia tone too.
Ooh.
So yeah, he was born in 1942 in Gapyeong, Cheonggi province in South Korea, so area of Seoul. He studied literature at Kyung University. He also went to Sorago Art, Yesedaehakyo, where he studied literature too, so he went to both. He published his first story, so after graduating, he published a story in a Seoul daily newspaper called the Gyeongyang Shinmun. But after that, let's skip down there, after that, he didn't write for another 10 years. He kind of just published a story, made his debut, and then he was just like gone for 10 years. So that's kind of interesting. I actually don't know what he did in the meantime. Actually, it was hard to find a lot of information about him personally. Mainly, I just found stuff about his works, especially, we'll talk about this one, The Dwarf, because that's his thing. This is interesting. He was a member of the Hangul generation, which means out of all these authors, he's probably one of the first people to actually be educated in pure Korean language. So in that sense, we're going to see a lot of themes here that don't actually relate to struggles with Japanese or these annexation period kind of problems. He didn't really deal with that, as you can see. I mean, he was born around the end of World War II, and so shortly thereafter was its own Korean War. He lived through all that stuff. So yeah, he's currently living. He's 71 years old.
Is he still writing?
I don't know. I know he's published somewhat recently. I don't know if he's currently writing right now, like he's going to come out with anything new, but I know he published as recent as like 2000, I want to say like 2003. So, nothing, I mean, his main, we'll go forward here, his main, oh, there's some more pictures of him. I think that's closer to now, up there.
Aww.
That was like an action shot. Yeah, I just like that picture. So I think that one's the same one as before. They did like a photo shoot with this outfit. They found like 3 or 4 different pictures where he was wearing this but had different poses.
Good choice.
Yeah, it's a very scholarly outfit. I think that was very good. Anyway, yeah, there's more pictures of him. These are his main works. So you see, he did the bulk of his writing from 1978 to 1985. And those pretty sure those are the Wikipedia dates, so they might not be the Korean publication dates, they might be the translation dates. But yeah, he has The Dwarf Launches a Little Ball, or 남정이가 떠올린 작은 공. Time Travel, Roots of Silence. He has some short stories like Knifeblade, Mobius Stripe. A lot of these short stories, actually, that he wrote, including these, the Klein Bottle, they went into The Dwarf Launches a Little Ball because it's actually a linked novel and really can be viewed as 12 separate short stories. So these are his main works. Like I said, I did find other things, mainly published in literary journals, I think, that were a little bit later, but these are what he's most known for.
That's an interesting word too, nanjangi. Is that like growth problem person? Like, what is that?
Nanjangi, I've heard
Like
Nanjangi,
Zanyi,
Nanjangi,
like in.
and it just means dwarf, as far as I know. That's what they call them all throughout the story, the Nanjangi. I've never actually looked into the etymology. Yeah, I guess they have the Chinese up there, which would have been interesting. Anybody know any Hangul? No, wait. This is Josei's name.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's
And then
recognized
there's
the name in Chinese.
like the little one right there. Soul, Tiger Soul. That's pretty
Okay.
much all I know.
Here?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm fairly certain that's Josei's name because when I was trying to find Josei in the library, I looked it up in Korean and I tried to memorize the Korean so I could try to find his name. I didn't. But yeah, so he likes. I see here he's got like Mobius stripe, time travel. He really likes these science themes. So he writes in a realistic, a kind of standard Korean style with the stark reality and the urban alienation and that kind of thing. But he also likes to employ these science terms. Just before I came, I found the Mobius stripe on the internet, and I read it, and it's really interesting. It talks. Do you know what a Mobius stripe is?
I know what a Mobius strip is. It's supposed to be striped?
Is it a strip?
Yeah.
It's probably a strip.
Okay.
I probably wrote it wrong. But yeah, Mobius strip.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing Mobius.
Yeah, you're good.
Mobius.
Mobius.
But how it's a thing in calculus, right? That they show in all the books. It's like
Yeah, it's like on the cover of every calculus
Yeah, it's like
textbook.
it's-
It folds onto itself. It doesn't like have a beginning or an end. It's just like.
basically it describes a shape. Same with the Klein bottle, I think. It describes a shape whose interior and exterior are interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
And really, this whole idea of the interchangeableness kind of works in here as we talk about like the irony of industrialization and the kind of doublespeak, as it were, the interchangeability that symbolizes. So it's kind of a cool theme he has going here. We don't see a ton of it in Knifeblade, but oh yeah, there's a few of his works. There's Tsimugebuli, The Roots of Silence, and then I grabbed this cover of the dwarf in French, I think.
Huh.
But I like this. It's very Munich, and what's that era called of art? It's like right before surrealism.
Impressionism.
I don't think it's impressionism. It's like all the German. It's German. Maybe German impression. No, they call it. It's like definitely. There's a whole bunch of German artists that started doing this thing with like the weird colored faces and the dark, somber tones and this weird like kind of sickly, almost dizzying sort of. The scream is a part of that thing. Anyway, I kind of like that because I think it really captures the whole. That what was happening in Germany at the time is what is happening in Korea at the time. And this is really what Josei is trying to take and expose, I guess. So I like that cover, and then that's a boring cover, and then this is Roots of Silence.
Should that be dwarf or
That's really funny, yeah. Go back one.
Go back.
The poor cover. A
dwarf?
dwarf.
She's a
A
little
dwarf. What do you know?
Not very good selling, I'm sure.
Yeah, I wonder where they got that. I didn't even notice that. So yeah, this is the dwarf was his tour de force. Like it was his main work. It was like you saw, it was kind of translated here into a bunch of different languages. I thought there's German. That's French again. I don't think all of these are the dwarf.
Yeah, I think just the German one.
Yeah. So mainly I pulled this because of the German one, but there was one in French. I forget what that one was. Maybe Portuguese. It's translated in a ton of languages. I saw one in Arabic even, and all sorts of things. So it's gained worldwide renown. There it is. I think in its original literary, it was published. I think as a series first, as short stories, and then put together. And then they even made it into this movie, which you can see parts of on YouTube, The Ball Shot by a Midget.
Oh gosh.
So that's
And midget spelled M-I-D-J-E-T in the poster too. Dang
Midget.
it.
Yeah, midget. Oh, I should have spelled it like the poster did, but Anyway, so yeah, the movie is interesting. Got these dwarves and stuff. There's some dwarves. Some of these are not Korean dwarves. I really wanted all Korean dwarves because it's a family of dwarves that this describes. Actually, the novel describes a family of dwarves, a middle-class family, and a wealthy family. The dwarves being a poor, laboring family. Anyway, but just get an idea of what some Asian dwarves look like.
I came in just the right time.
You did.
And then there's this.
What the heck? What is this thing?
It's from a movie called In Bruges. It's Colin Farrell karate chopping a dwarf.
God.
Anyways. That's what I thought of, like the very first thing I read in the book. Anyway, so what we have here, and that's really applicable to this story
It
because
really is.
the dwarf represents, I mean, he focuses so much on dwarves because what he's trying to do is really criticize the capitalization, the industrialization that was happening in Korea at the time. Talk a little bit more about that later. But the dwarf represents the little guy, like basically the poor laboring class upon whose backs this economic miracle that everybody called it in Korea occurred. And so this is why he picks dwarves to really symbolize that, and really, if you read some of the stories, the dwarves like take a beating. Like literally in every single story, somebody's beating up a dwarf in the picture, in the story. So like that's why. Anyway, like I said, writing style is stark and direct. He couldn't. This is at Park Chung-hee's presidency, which was a military takeover, and so there was still, even though it was technically democracy, I think at the time it was still very strict, and there's still censorship things around. So we see Jo Se-hee getting under the censorship by just using irony. He wasn't directly criticizing the regime or anything, but he used this dark irony, but he still made the story direct and very, his sentences are very succinct if you read them in Korean, and we'll kind of see a few here. And the idea was that he could reach everybody. He wanted to reach anyone that could basically read Korean, could read his stories, and that was the idea. Like I said, it's got a poor laboring family. You have the three, or I don't know if this is George Orwell's thing, but three social classes depicted here. It's a little bit surrealist, but it has these sudden stark descriptions of reality, dark irony, and describes the dark side of growing capitalistic power. You always have a major theme is this abuse of power and class struggle. You always have somebody here, and I won't get too far ahead of that, and then the urbanization. It wouldn't let me do alienization. I don't know if that's a word.
I don't think so.
Alienation.
I think just alienation.
Right. You have like these, in Knifeblade especially, you have this idea that being lost in the crowd. You have her husband, you have his perspective a little bit. He rides on the bus every morning and he feels lost and just has these dark thoughts all the time. And the wife has this whole like separation, even inside the family. There's like these major dividing lines. And so I think he's really trying to emphasize that here. So, brief history. I don't know if you guys, some of you probably studied this in classes and know a lot more than me, but quick Wikipedia search. From 1962 to 1989, Korean GDP went from 2.7 billion to 230 billion. So, GDPs don't generally do that. That's a major trend line upwards. It was basically achieved. Korea doesn't have very much like resource power. It's a small country, half a small country really, and they don't have a ton of power, so they mainly achieved this by creating cheap labor. Funny story, originally Nike was, their main competitive power was that they produced their shoes cheaper than everyone else, and their main facilities were actually in Korea. And this, in that time, that's when that was starting, when Nike was expanding. And they actually got screwed by Korea because one guy running a Vietnamese operation, no, it wasn't Nike, it was New Balance. They started copying him. One guy running a Vietnamese operation took all of New Balance's shoes. I think it was a Korean guy. And he lost the contract, so he just went and sold them onto the market for a much cheaper price and basically flooded the market, crushed their pricing.
Dang.
Thing.
So that's
Anyway.
why all the Hawk sandals were New Balance now.
Exactly.
After.
So yeah, so you have some problems from that. But anyway, they created all these factories, all these manufacturing things, and they used their population as a resource to grow their GDP. So while this was an awesome economic growth for Korea, it also had major consequences. And actually had major consequences for Nike in the future because Korea's economy expanded so quickly that the cost of labor went up and they had to move to other cheaper places. Anyway, but it pulled people to the city, and this is what starts this whole urban alienation and this loss in the crowd trend that we see. 45% of the factories are located just in Gyeonggi-dong alone, and so you have all these people moving there. And this is, I mentioned that because that's where Sehui was born and grew up and went to school. And this is when the tiger economy started. I didn't know it was called the tiger economy, but
Very Asian.
that's such a Korean thing, tiger moms, tiger economy. And I like this here because you have the farming, the mix right here of the rural and the big apartment complex right here. And it's like a dividing line right there. So I think that kind of, I don't know what this picture is or anything, but it symbolizes a lot of the struggle of the story and the story. So yeah, some Knifeblade. So did you all get a chance to actually read the story?
Yeah.
Did everybody or glance over it or check it out? I sent you a link to the crane, that worked, right? Okay, good. So basically, short summary of the story is about a family basically trying to break into the middle class, or like on the low end of the middle class, but living with other middle class families. And you've got, your basic mother, father, daughter, son, normal family. And you see this struggle with the family across the street, and then like in the back and the front. And it describes these various families, and from their perspectives on them, you kind of get an idea of what Korean society is like at the time. You have this family. Lost my train of thought there. You have this family, and one of the main struggles. There's a few underlying struggles in the thing. There's like the deeper emotional struggle that is underlying everything. But one of the more immediate struggles is they can't get water. And I thought this is one of the ironies of, I think one of the main ironies of the story, is that you have this family living in this industrial place. I mean, they're right outside of Seoul, basically, and you can't even get water, which is one of the basic things that you would think that, I mean, any society in the ancient world starting, one thing they settle around water. Everybody has water. That's just how it is. If you don't have water, your society collapses. But I think, and the water could be a symbol of a lot of things. It could be a symbol of like morality, of like basic societal decency that is completely lacking, and that people are having to get down on the ground and go lower to get. So there's basically the story. At first glance, it's very simple, but as you like unfold the layers, it's just like layer upon layer meaning. So that's one thing I really liked about it. But basically, so that's a struggle. They're trying to get water, and in this, she meets a dwarf who's coming and saying that he can give him water faster by installing a new tap. But there's a well company that digs wells who actually doesn't really like the dwarf, mainly because he's taking out of their well company business. And so she feels this affinity, this connection to the dwarf, aka connection to the lower class, and she's starting middle class. She feels this connection, and she runs after the dwarf, has him dig a well, but in the middle of it, there's this fight where a man from the well company comes and beats up the dwarf, and then she attacks the man with this knife, the fillet knife, and cuts him, and he runs away, and then the dwarf, takes his things and goes, and they get water for the first time, like at 11 o'clock instead of 2 in the morning. And that's how the story ends. And so at first glance, it's not a very, it's like, what just happened in this story, like, basically, the dwarf dug or put in a tap and they got water. But, you have all these things, and first of all, it's called Knifeblade, which I actually been thinking a lot about, and still don't know if I'm right on this one. But the story starts out talking about the knives in Shine, the main character's kitchen. And she has 3 knives. One's just a junky knife, and one is a hefty, a nice, a sturdy knife that she doesn't even let a sharpener touch if he doesn't know what's going on. And then one's this scary, fillet knife. They call it a fillet knife, but
Yeah, and I picture like this teeny little like fillet knife, but it can't be something like
well,
that.
in Korean it's kai, which is
Okay.
a fish knife.
Then you think it'd be pretty small.
Well, I don't know. Fish knives can. I looked up on Korean, like on Google, just images for fish knives. So I was thinking about putting a picture up, but it says it's a double-edged knife. Like I'm assuming more like a dagger or something like that. But a fillet knife is actually
Curved.
it's like a those. It's like a butcher knife, but with a point. So I'm still not really sure what. Or like normal American fillet knives are the curved, skinny ones. So I can't really picture this, but I think as far as the knife blades go, you really could. I mean, right from the start, you have 3 knife blades, 3 social classes. That seems plausible. I'm not sure what each represent because when you go down, I mean, you could have the nice, good knife blade. It's like the upper, middle, and then the lower class is the junky knife blade that nobody cares about. But then that doesn't really make sense for the whole story. One thing I did think of though is in the end she takes the fillet knife, the scary, kind of ominous knife, and she cuts the man a symbol of corruption and bullying, and forces him to leave the lower class, the dwarf, alone. So it could. I think he likes to employ this idea of. With the dwarf launching, I mean, it's called the dwarf launches a little ball, which again in his main work. And I think the dwarf represents the lower class, but the little ball represents like the legacy, as it were. He throws this ball, and even though the dwarf is down here, the ball can actually soar above everything else. And that is the lower class's legacy. The whole thing that they built is actually going to remain, as it were. And so in this case, I mean, you could see the knife blade as this maybe the lower class or the middle class, and I don't know if he's if he's favoring the middle class or if he likes them. He kind of takes a mixed perspective on it. We could say that while it can't kill the upper class, it definitely can like harm them and stave them off, and maybe that knife could represent like this book or these stories or his
some
agenda.
potential for like rebellion.
Right. I don't know if like rebellion, but this idea that it's going to have a lasting effect. It's that even though they're trying to cover up this whole thing, that there's going to be something there that leaves a scar or a impression. So those are just kind of a few thoughts I had about the symbolism of that and the whole knife blade story. This is a picture of, I don't even think that's Korea, even though it said it was. But that's what I kind of imagine it to look like, this is in the 70s. Yeah, it could be Chicago.
Signs are definitely in English.
Yeah, English signs, and there's this other thing about belt. I think it's New York.
Did Korea have cars like that
One-way
then too?
sign.
I don't know.
Never seen a Korean car like that.
Right. So probably not Korea, but it depicts this urban decay, and it's kind of funny because he focuses on this whole this kind of decaying, rotten structure. When, ironically, this is the time when Korea is actually. I mean, the Korea you guys know, you guys have seen is a shiny, unless you were out in the countryside and saw that, but you see this shiny, this really bright new. Pristine kind of capitalistic structure. It's really impressive, and I think what he's trying to have people remember is this is what it took to get there. So let's jump into the story. I didn't take a bunch of Korean off this because I just like this as it were, and the Korean was pretty much the same thing. But you have a whole bunch of things here. Like these are just newspaper headlines. that she's reading off of the newspaper that her husband's reading. And you have high officials call for social reforms. Foundation head embezzles 10 million won from school. South Vietnamese refugees in the U.S. demonstrate against self-driving the ways of former officials. Employment outlook dim despite recovery. So you have, first of all, you have these jobs, scarce. Add-ons boost budget 1.5 trillion won. But then, government spending. This idea that the Yoido National Assembly rests on 24 pillars costing 10 million won each. Extravagant government buildings built while other people can't find jobs. Residents of contempt zones, redevelopment zones lack 300,000 won, give up apartment rights, seek new housing. This right here is a little Easter egg. It's a little reference to the dwarf. Because ultimately what happens in the dwarf is this poor family sells their apartment rights, basically their whole livelihood, to these developers, basically because the government lowballs them, and then these developers just come in and offer them a little bit more, so they have to sell to the developers, who then turn around and sell it for $200,000 profits and things like that, and just tear apart. The story I read, this happens, they demolish their housing, and then they burn this guy in his car. So dwarves fight back. It's kind of cool. Seek new housing, yeah. Site defense tax, highest cost of phone calls, armed robbery, rape, forgery, timber thieves, red pepper cut with sawdust. There's a thing about fish being out of the fish. You have this university professor kind of condemning all of this stuff and calling for reform and stuff like that. So this was, it's in the story, it's all put together, but this was probably a common newspaper heading at the time. This is what people were dealing with on an everyday basis. And then I love this part. It says, nothing different here from the previous day's newspaper, nothing out of the ordinary. These stories, and yet people read the same newspaper day after day. So, 어제 신문과 다른 것이 없다. And this I just pulled out so you can see his sentence style. 다른 것이 없다. 이상할 것도 없는 이야기다. 그런데도 사람들은 날마다 같은 신문을 찾아 읽는다. 남편이 그 신문을 읽고 있었다.
Yeah, I didn't take too close of a look at the Korean, but I wondered that because the translation was really choppy, like that. Tons of tiny short sentences, and I was bothered, I didn't like the stylistics at all, but it's good to see that reflects the Korean sentence.
No, and that's exactly how he was writing. It's the idea of this stark, very choppy, very brief sentences, as it were. And ending in these words like opda, opda, igninda. You almost have this kind of truncated poetry kind of feel when you read it. So this points out the writing style, and then this points out a very interesting criticism on society that everybody's just picking up these newspapers, reading these stories, and then they're just doing nothing. It's just this kind of apathetic lifestyle that everybody's living. I think he criticizes that right from the outset here. So then we have this one. This is a little bit later when you get a view into the husband's idea, or his whole thing. And there's a few words I wanted to point out here which I thought were interesting. Greg, can you read just the English part?
Yeah.
Piece of Korean.
He had told her that at work in pedestrian underpasses, when viewed by indifferent passerby, when surrounded by exhaust from vehicle tailpipes, he felt pursued and at a loss. He had said that every day, without fail, he would, or when he commuted on the packed buses, he saw city garbage trucks leaving on their rounds, several at a time. Shine understands what her husband is saying. She wonders how many souls a day are loaded into those garbage trucks and then disposed of. But no one in this world talks in that manner.
Yeah, isn't it just dark? First of all, here you've got this indifferent passerbys, feels pursued and at a loss. Before this, he talks about how when they met, when they were young, they had all this hope, and she and her husband, he thought she was very motivated, and he married her for that reason. and her husband would read all these books, and his greatest desire was to write a good book, and that was all he wanted to do. But then he has to go to work, and he has like a sick father and a sick mother, and he spends a whole bunch of money on medical bills, has to sell a house, pay it off, move down, all this stuff, and he just gets caught up in the whole rat race of the industrialist structure here.
Is it bad when I was reading this, I thought of Monty Python when they're like, bring out your dead?
Well, and that's the other thing, is you have like, I couldn't figure out what this actually means, how many souls, because then, so I looked at, well, first of all, in the Korean you have, it's like uncaring or hard.
Without a heart,
Yeah. 지나치는 사람들의 시선, he looks at their like uncaring eye line, their line of sight.
Yeah, I'm more serious about it too. Like they're throwing out, I guess if we're talking about the industrialized, like the wealthy people are throwing out all this food and stuff, and her seeing souls, like, you know, that food could go to help people possibly is kind of a idea or twist that I was taking to it. Souls a day are loaded into those garbage trucks, meaning there's food, clothes, and who knows what else that the poor could actually use, that the rich are just taking advantage of and throwing away and just, you know, not helping anybody out.
That's a good thought.
I think urban isolation too, just, you know, you've got all these people in all this city and you produce so much waste, but the people, in a sense, a lot of the people are also waste. They don't have friends, they don't have, there's a lot of, in my story that was talking about stuff like that.
Because the word here is 정신 for
Interesting.
souls, which
얼마나 많은 정신을 yeah.
정신, and I always think of like 정신을 잃는다, 정신을 차리는,
정신이 없다.
정신이 없다. Like it's this idea of like not your soul. I mean, it's
your
영혼,
mind.
it's your but it's your 정신. So I mean
that's different.
Like they're loading people's, not necessarily dead bodies, though I'm sure that was happening.
Mentality.
And I almost actually like the English translation because of that. And maybe I just don't understand Korean well enough to like really get the depth of this word. But it's like you're actually taking like the sanity and like you're just throwing it away.
I like that.
So I mean, I think it encompasses all those things. There's probably actually dead bodies in there. There's probably a lot of waste and everything that could actually go to help people that the upper class is just throwing away. There's also I didn't put a section in, but there's also, actually, yeah, I did. So, oh, and then I pulled the Sultan Peggy Kassel. The idea of the rich exhaust, the thick steam. And I think about like the Han River before they started to clean it up. It's just this nasty, nasty river with all this pollution and stuff. So you have an author here calling that out before people actually realize it, as usual. And so then you have, I was furthering the whole idea of the corruption and stuff. She talks about the family across the alley. Well, there's a family in back and the family across, and this is the family across. And she talks about how they always have their radio on, or not the radio, TV on. It's just blaring all the time. But at one point, there was this time when they were like trying to clean up corruption in the government, and then at that time, the family took all their clothes and stuff and all their nice things. They like hid them away. They put on their like normal clothes to blend into everybody else and just like laid low, didn't turn their TV on. And then after that passed, families now back out and doing things. So you see the actions of this family or the activity level of this family, and it's interesting in Korean because I actually think the Korean points that out better. But you have the activity of this level family kind of showing an inverse relationship with the moral decay. At one point, there was somebody actually trying to clean things up and take care of things, but at this point, it's just back. There's all this corruption, and this family obviously if you go by the government pay scale, the salary of the man in the house in the back is quite a bit less than Shine's husband. Her small family lives humbly on a large salary, but the large family lives extravagantly on a small salary. There's this like contradiction here. Again, going back to those Moebius stripes and time bottles and stuff. How do you explain it? We've heard about the good life till our ears ache, but the family back seems to be the only ones enjoying it. No poverty there. So Shine asks herself, for goodness sake, which side is that family on? And which side are we on? And I like this last part about these sides. Because nothing like really illustrates a class struggle like drawing dividing lines and putting people on sides. But first of all, you see that they so they're not living modestly, they're quietly living. And then these ones are which is like, I'm gonna look that up again. But I think it means like actively or boisterously. Yeah, that's what it means. So it's not actually like a modest versus extravagance. It's like a loud versus quiet. And actually, I was kind of critiquing the translation here because I think it would have been better for him to add that in, especially with the whole theme of the radio and the TV and all this stuff blaring and them getting like bombarded by noise on either side.
And that imagery flies in English. Like there's no way,
Right.
like there's no reason you shouldn't do something like that.
So you could say they live quietly on a small scale. Or
Yeah.
They can like live boisterously or lives noisy. Yeah. We could do that. But and then I like the good life here. This is one of those. If you're gonna talk about, I don't really like to, but if you're gonna talk about capitalistic propaganda, I mean, this is it right here. The good life. They want you to Kanye West wrote a song about it. But this is what they want to sell you, right? This is the whole goal of marketing. If they can make this product somehow make you think it's going to make your life better, then you're going to buy it. So I had to look at that in Korean, which is the 들어온 the 우리 키가 아프게 들어온, so like the ears hurting. It's a bad translation, but
Yeah.
this is good right here. That heard about until their ears hurt. 잘 살 수 있는 세상. Like it's interesting, the world there you can live well in. So obviously you see this kind of ironic propaganda that they threw in there. That's like, oh, we've heard about this world that's out there, this new world, this 잘 살 수 있는 세상. But
it's really pretty in Korean too. Just like that world that this 잘 살 수 있는 세상, like it's come into our ears so much that it like hurt, like it's blasted its way and it just like really hurt our ears.
And that's why I think it would have been good for him to do this, because when you talk about the blasting, there's noise is a motif in this story. You always have this noise. You have like the if there isn't some sort of like TV going, radio going, someone yelling, it's like the white noise of the city is just an ever-present thing. And I think he actually, with his truncated writing style, I think he can actually, between each, I mean, I don't know if this is correct, but between each period, you could say there's like this, it's just blaring, you know, and I think you can actually kind of feel that by the way he sets it up. And so I would have liked if he would have taken humbly and extravagantly and made more of an imagery of noise there, because I think that would have supported that. But all in all, I feel like the translation is good, and he does get some really good stuff there. And then I really like, this will lead into the last bit, perfect, but the whole sides thing. So you have the dwarf come, he does the water, she fights the man off and cuts him, and he runs away, the man with the nude woman tattoo. And he runs away, and the dwarf is there, and she picks him up, and she's thinking about, she really feels like this connection to him, and I think it's kind of interesting how she's like, I wish you guys lived next to us. Like, I wish that these kind of people were here, and you have Shine, this middle-class person that's able to see past that. So I really like her character, and I think Tosei is trying to say something with that characterization. But she tells him, and early in the story, she talks like kind of randomly. You have this thing where she's talking like absentmindedly tells her husband like, we're dwarves. Like, we're dwarfs. Dwarves. I think we're supposed to say dwarves.
7 dwarves.
And dwarfs.
Okay.
But it says dwarfs in this story for sure.
Huh.
Yeah, dwarfs. Anyways, she tells her husband like, we're dwarfs. And he's like, he doesn't understand. And I don't understand at the beginning. But then you have this end part again. She says, Mr. She spoke quietly. We're dwarfs too. Maybe we've never thought of each other that way, but we're on the same side. And so with this story especially, you have this, and this is the culminating, well, the climax is really when the water comes out and his work paid off. But this is really, I think, where you have it boils down to the meaning, and you have somehow this alliance between the middle and the low class, or this should be alliance. He's saying here that Jose is saying there should be some, you shouldn't be looking down on these people because, I mean, really, what did you just come from? And you're all on the same side, as it were. Like, there is no sides. Maybe there is a side when it comes to like corruption and bullying and this intimidation. Like that should be fought against. But there's a very beautiful picture of this woman, and I don't think that's an accident either, that it's a woman and a dwarf, basically the two underprivileged members of society fighting against this thing, and they say they're on the same side. So in Korean, I just put that there. 신이가 낮게 말했다. 저희들도 난청이랍니다. 서로 몰아서 그렇지. 우리는 한창이에요. So we're on the same 한창. So I really like that. You have George Orwell wrote this whole manifesto in the book 1984 about classes, and he wrote in this propaganda novel into his book. But he talks about how the lower class, all they want to do is become the middle class. And the middle class, generally, all they think about is overthrowing the high class. And generally what the middle class does is exploits the lower class in order to do that, and the lower class just doesn't go anywhere. And so you have Jose, he kind of, George Orwell wasn't actually thinking that because he was kind of arguing against communism. Anyway, but you have Jose, he kind of, emphasizing that, or kind of saying that all the classes shouldn't be a class, there really shouldn't be any classes, trying to erase class distinction, which I feel is still a relevant topic today. And that's why this book was so, The Dwarf and Knifeblade, I think that's why they were so well received, and they're still talked about because they're still relevant today. You have same problems. Any third world country that begins to develop goes through these same things, and you always have a price to the industrialization. An economist will tell you that that is an acceptable price, but unfortunately, I think Jose would argue with that. So yeah, so there's Knifeblade. Any questions? Any thoughts on it?
Did you look at Sine at all, like her name? Do you think at all, like maybe like new love, or like, 'cause names are never insignificant.
Right. I never thought of that. I know Sine means like the city center.
That's like shi and then ne, like shi,
Oh, this is
ne.
Shin-e.
This is shin.
All right. No, actually, I never looked at her name. Because yeah, I guess it could mean Sine, but I don't know Hanja well enough to really extrapolate a meaning out of that.
Yeah, I know shin like new, shin, and then like edon, like, or like love, sarang
I know the dwarves have interesting names. It's not in this one, but in other ones they have these weird like stub legs or hunchback, or I think they may actually. I'd like to see the Korean, but they may actually be kind of like slave names, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
And that could definitely be a motif. But yeah, I never looked at her name, so I don't know. Professor Peterson were here. You could tell us.
Yay.
Oh, I'll give you one of these.